Still a couple people rolling in, but welcome to part 2 of our CDP Webinar Series. My name is Sammy Anderson. I'm our marketing manager here at Softcrylic. Couple things throughout the webinar today. Jerry and Vinoo are going to go into some detail around how you know when you're ready for a CDP, a couple of use cases, and then obviously any questions you guys have throughout, put it in the Q&A, throw it in the chat. They'll either address it live on the webinar. If we run out of time, it'll be addressed in a follow-up email and blog. So no matter what, questions are going to get answered. So if you think of one, or if after the fact you're like, wait, well, I want to know about that, email us info@softcrylic.com and we'll make sure we get some feedback sent your way. Other than that, I'll pass it off to Jerry and enjoy the webinar, guys.
Thank you, Sammy. Hi everyone. I'm going to introduce myself quickly. I think if you guys know me, and then pass it to Vinoo to get to know a little bit more about our guest today. But my name is Jerry. I lead the solution architecture group at Softcrylic. Today actually marks my 5th year with the company, which is wow, it's flying. But at Softcrylic, we help clients in different phases of their work, whether it's in analytics or data science or visualization or data activation. I had the pleasure to work with Vinoo over the past year and a half in growing their MarTech stack. We have a really fun story on how this came together. But before we dive into that, would love Vinoo just to introduce himself and his role at BJ's Wholesale. To you, Vinoo.
Sure. Thanks, Jerry. Thanks for having me. Hi, everyone. My name is Vinoo Palayoor. I'm a senior director here at BJ's Wholesale Club. I'm responsible for enterprise architecture, cloud architecture. I've also been with the company for 5 years, Jerry. So
oh, nice. Okay.
5 years. Yep. Awesome. I work on solutions architecture, right? So solutioning across the company. My primary focus is membership and marketing areas, but I also work across the entire organization, supporting project teams and working on some of our largest technology implementations. So I'm super happy and excited to be here with all of you and talk a little bit about our journey implementing real-time CDP for the organization.
Awesome. Yeah. So Vinoo, you're aware, like we're doing this like series that is divided into multiple parts around the CDP. So last week, actually, I talked a bit about the RFP process. And this week, the topic is mainly going to be around how do you assess whether you need a CDP? But with you being with us, I definitely want to expand into more some of your experience with seeing this from the ideation to today. You guys are live with the CDP. But before we start, like a funny story is in December 2020, Vinoo found me on YouTube in one of the previous webinars and reached out, and I really thought it was a spam because I was like, it's on YouTube, folks are finding us, but the beauty that is marketing works, and thanks for the efforts on our marketing team, and the fact that we're able to do these webinars allowed us to meet clients such as you. So excited this happening, and I told them, I was like, one day we're going to do a webinar together, and
I know.
Here we are.
Pretty cool. It's pretty cool.
No, this is awesome. So Vinoo, maybe we can start with, since we have an audience that is global and also folks that are from Canada as well, the West Coast, might not be as familiar with BJ's Wholesale Club. Maybe you can walk us through, like, what is the business model like? What have you guys been doing? How you guys have innovated and pivoted through the pandemic? Let's hear a little bit more about the company, and then we can talk about why you guys start thinking about growing your digital presence and expanding your marketing solutions.
Sure. Yeah, so BJ's Wholesale Club is a retailer wholesale club brand, and we have 229 clubs and growing all across the East Coast. We have 159 gas stations as well alongside those clubs. And we have a growing digital business, as you mentioned, right? So with the pandemic, our members came to us looking for convenience through the digital channel. So everything from same-day delivery and BOPIC, these were all services that our members were truly excited and started to engage with in a big way. And we have a growing membership base. So we're a membership-based business, a loyalty business. You have to have a membership to shop with us. And we have nearly 7 million members that we serve. So it's pretty exciting to be a part of a project that's really kind of bringing together, which is really what this CDP was all about, is synergizing a lot of that member touch points and engagements that we have across all the different channels.
Awesome. So Vinoo, how did it all start? Like you guys, obviously, you're a thriving brand. You've been doing. I know you guys been around for a while, and you have. You mentioned you already have a good customer base, and you do a lot of communication, a lot of marketing, right? You have a strong pre the CDP space. You have a strong email program. You have a strong direct mail program. Your web experience as well as the mobile app experience is top of the line. How did the idea of like, okay, we need to have a CDP, how did that come to surface? Was it the typical someone has went to like a conference and heard about it, or an executive coming in and has this idea, has done it before, or there was like something else happening where you guys were like, we should consider using a CDP?
Yeah, it's a good question. There's a lot to it. I would say that one of the driving forces for us was, we have a very rich enterprise data warehouse, a lot of great information about our member base, right? So all of our active and memberships, but also people that are no longer with the company, we still have a lot of great information, a lot of great metrics and information about those members. But it was in an analytical space, right? So analytics is very different than what a marketer needs to be able to do. So one of the driving forces for us was really trying to remove some of these data silos that existed. So we had a digital business that was working off of a data set that they had. We had our offline team that was working on, club traffic and information there. But we really hadn't brought together a lot of this information into one place so that a marketer could do a lot of this segmentation and audience management in our current, prior to this implementation. The marketing team would lean quite a bit on technical resources, analytical resources, and our time to market for some of our campaigns were sometimes weeks, months to get the right information we need to run basic campaigns, right? So a lot of this was, how can a marketer be and move more to our self-service model, right? Where they can create the audiences they want, they can drive this kind of independently. That was one factor. We also wanted to make sure that we could do more journeys with our members. So more, you can think of it more like event-based marketing, right? So where touch points happen along a customer's journey with us as a brand, and we want to engage with them in different ways that's personalized, right? So those are the big things that were kind of driving this, right? So we have new members joining, right? So as people are coming into the brand, we want to be able to treat them in a very specific way, but follow them through the course of their trajectory with us as members, and be able to engage with them in ways that show that we know what they're doing with our different products and services.
Yeah, I think that's very cool that you guys early on you were able to identify that getting the data, breaking the silos, bringing it closer to the marketer, and enriching it, right? I think I know you and I had the discussions around. There's been the concern of third-party cookies and the idea that our first party is going to be the main driver. But right now it is sitting in a data warehouse that is accessible. It takes work. It takes a lot of manual effort and requests and a lot of people involved we want to be in a self-service, I think that these are all great drivers for saying we need a data platform like a CDP that is business friendly, accessible, and you're still doing all the work bringing the data in, but then it's in a place where marketers can hook into and do things with it.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Like doubling down on our first party data, because we have the advantage of having a membership business. So we have a lot of very rich first party data, right? So being able to bring that all together into a CDP and then be able to activate that across all of our different digital marketing vendors. And that's something that we kind of grew into, knowing what's possible with the project. I think the timing was really good for us because we didn't go in with trying to solve for third-party cookies. That wasn't necessarily like a goal for us. But as we got into it, the timing couldn't have been better, right? So now we have this, this kind of first-party data source for us to be able to activate on our own domain and on our own site and properties. But also through different digital marketing vendors that we work with. So it really sets us up well.
Absolutely. Let me ask you this. So given that you guys also do quite a bit of marketing automation, right? So you have a process, regardless of what that process is, but you are bringing your first party data into a place where it's enabling your emails, it's enabling your push notification, enabling your direct mail. Was there at any point a discussion to say, well, we kind of have a CRM with a layer on top of it that is an automation? Was there a debate about, do we really need a CDP? Or we just need to have a better campaign management tool sitting on top of this CRM?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good point. I would say we probably could, could you hack it, right? You could create your audiences right out of the EDW and do all of that, right? So yeah, and in a way, that's kind of what we were doing prior. We had some marketing tools and things that we are using. But I think the biggest thing that the CDP enabled for us was really the digital part of the story, right? So being able to collect all of that very rich analytics data from our website and even our mobile app, and then being able to use those data fragments, right? Those are all different touch points. That's very hard to do just in an analytical space, right? You need something that's really purposefully built for being able to collect all those data fragments and then be able to collapse those into a profile. So it was really exciting to kind of see that come together, where you could see a member's experience shopping in a club, but then also searching for fresh categories or TVs on our website, right? That being able to combine those different fragments about a member's engagement across two different channels, but have them all quickly realized in the same place, almost real time. I mean, that's extremely powerful, right? So that's not something that you can do kind of on the side, right? You need a purposely built platform that handles the data integration, so onboarding the data, but then being able to be integrated with the rest of the ecosystem so that you can activate it on the website through email, as you mentioned, personalized emails, so that you need something that's really integrated, inbound and outbound.
Makes sense. Going back to the idea of CRM, because I think we had that discussion early on, but you guys initially thought about you wanted a CRM, and then you thought you will get a CRM with a CDP, but then you're like, whoa, these two are not the same. I'm sure a lot of other clients are in a similar situation where there is that confusion around what a CRM can provide versus what the CDP can. Can you touch a little on this, on how you guys thought through it?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of alphabet soup, right? There's the CRM, the DMP, the CDP. I'm sure I'm missing some.
So many.
There's so many.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, I think for, I think it was for us, there's a lot of education, right, to go through this process. And I think there's certainly a lot of overlap between a CRM and a CDP. But I think the big aha for us was, first focusing on our core objective, which was being able to create audiences quickly as a marketer, and learning that, CRM is really more focused around sales and service orientation. I think of it more like CRM's more transactional in nature, whereas a CDP is more marketing focused, more real time, and it's more about engagement across your customer base in a much more real-time way, and through integrated channels. Like, so we were talking earlier, right? Being able to integrate with your broader ecosystem of where your customers are interacting with you, right? The CRM doesn't really do that as effectively. It's more for internal and, like I said, sales oriented kind of processes and workflows. So, but we didn't know that, right? We didn't know that going into this. We started to, as we learned what we were trying to do, that we had to kind of learn that as we went and understood, what this was really going to be for us. So, yeah,
I think that's a common thing a lot of people go through, and I think that's a healthy thing to assess early on, because so that there's no surprises. Okay, so you guys are with that. You went and invested with an Adobe stack, right? With Adobe Experience Platform, with the CDP, in addition to other tools there. How, I don't think you guys went through like a full RFP, but you guys pick your technology very carefully. You have a suite of other vendors within your ecosystem. What was the main thing that drove you to select to go with Adobe in that sense? And you were not at that time, I think you didn't have much of an Adobe footprint anyways.
No, we didn't. We had some with AEM and some asset manager, which we use extensively from a creative perspective. I'd say like there were some key things, right? So we talked a lot about integration, being able to onboard our data in a kind of very modern way, I would say. We have a pretty modern stack in terms of our engineering disciplines, pretty good. We have a good, really great team around folks that do data engineering here at the company, very mature ETL-based processes that we use. So we knew how to onboard data through different third parties. And so we wanted a platform that could work with the broader set of our tools, right? So everything from, we use a lot of cloud technology. So we wanted to be able to onboard our data using an ecosystem that we already have and use on a daily basis. So that was kind of a key thing, right? So being able to interact with cloud-based solutions was really key. We wanted to have something that had a lot of APIs to interact with, so that we could, pull data and move data around, not everything through point and click in a UI. We wanted to have something that was very robust in terms of an API set. And then just, from a marketing perspective, we wanted things to be real time, right? Real time was really key for us, right? If people are doing things on the site, you don't want to wait for, let's say, 24 hours before that engagement data is available in the CDP, right? So having true real time engagement was really key to us. Our members trust us with our data. We wanted to make sure we had a good governance and privacy policy in place, so that we were doing the right things from a data governance perspective. That was really key for us. And I guess another thing is, a big part of what we were trying to do was we wanted to own our own marketing stack, right? So that was really key. Like, we wanted to have, people, process, technology, but across IT, marketing, and the different stakeholders. We wanted to own this platform. We wanted to own it, run it ourselves. And so we wanted to make sure we knew how to kind of onboard the tool, but drive the car too, right? So that was really like being able to understand how to use it was really, really key to us as well.
Excellent. So let me ask you this. So you guys have gone through coming up with use cases that you wanted to deploy in the CDP.
Yeah.
And those came in early on. What was the process like? Was it, did you guys already have some pain points you knew you wanted to solve the CDP? Did you do like some kind of assessment or workshop where you brought an outsider from strategy and came up with some of these use cases? What can you share with us on that?
Yeah, sure. We did have some strategic collateral that we had done a few years ago, and that was kind of like we started with that, right? So there was some really good use cases there on what was possible. But I like to think about the use cases are really key, right? Having the use cases, it really kind of frames what you're doing and what problem you're trying to solve. So we did start with some of those use cases. So there was the use cases you know, and then the use cases you don't know, right? So we didn't, some of these were like what you would traditionally think in true omni-channel type of engagements, where you would have, okay, now we're going to be able to have somebody going to a club, but then being able to do things like they haven't necessarily shopped in a certain period of time, but they've browsed our website and been looking for TVs or looking for things in the fresh category. How can we combine those two elements about a member's journey with us and activate something that's specifically catered to them, right? So those were kind of the baseline use cases, but then we also started seeing things as we onboarded the technology that we could do that was beyond some of these other use cases, right? So it's true multi-channel journeys, right? Where we would have people falling into certain categories in a funnel for the marketing flow. But then based on their actions, we would, because everything is happening in real time as they're engaging with emails or not engaging with emails, we wanted to be able to now take the next step with them and kind of anticipate their next action. So those were some of the things that as we started really getting more advanced, and certainly, this is still day one for us, right? So it's not like we've had this for a long time, but we're starting to think about some of these use cases now that we have the stack in place. Our business teams are thinking, there's a lot of light bulbs going off in terms of what's possible now. So it's more, some of these use cases evolve. You go in with a certain thought and thought process on what you think you're going to get. But what I've seen is that it's really expanded, like it's really taken off in terms of what use cases are possible. And some of the infrastructure we put in have enabled certain capabilities we didn't even think we would need. So for example, because we're instituting Adobe Launch, we have the ability now to do things more server side, right? So not, server side, not just with the Adobe stack, so all the Adobe tools, but also server side with some of our digital marketing vendors. So now we can, try to move away from some of the client side browser-based integrations we've been doing with some of these digital marketing vendors. That's not something we necessarily set out to do, but because of the CDP infrastructure and what we were doing, we were able to kind of get some of that stuff as well.
Yeah, I seeing what you guys have gone through, it's a beautiful story that the CDP started enabling you to get on that path of continue to modernize, right? The idea of the way you're deploying today, your analytics is using the latest and greatest, whether the Adobe tags, and then that is just the next step before going into server side. The ability for you also to trigger any events, whether that is feeding data into the CDP or into your Juni builder solution. It's great. So you see, so the CDP, as there's always this debate around what is truly a CDP, right? I always define it as a place where you're able to bring multiple data sources and have a unified view of whether it's the customer or the member, the patient, whatever it is. But then on top of it, you're able to take action. Not only I'm bringing data together, but able to take action. Do you agree with that? Do you see that is there more to the CDP in your opinion, now that you've gone through it from day one, from day zero to implementing it today?
No, I think that's well said. I think I think about it as onboarding and then activation, right? Onboarding is bringing your data in, and there's what we've seen is there's data lakes, and then there's kind of a system of record for the profile, right? So in the at least in the Adobe suite, they have their own data lake where you can onboard a whole bunch of data. But then it's brought into the unified profile, after the fact, right? So you have a lot of data sitting in a data lake, but then you have one unified profile that collapses all these data fragments and information you have that you've been collecting in the data lake, and centralizes it with a unique identifier or multiple unique identifiers, right? Because each system of record that you're sourcing data from might have a different identifier, right? So being able to identify what those primary keys are, and then so there's that, synergizing the data, which is just kind of all part of data ingestion and creating those profiles. And then now you have it. So now how do you activate it, right? How do you send it to the various different places, which is, the activation part. And, I think that's part of why the CDP is so powerful, because it has both sides of the coin. It has the part where you're ingesting data and unifying it, but then if it's well integrated into the broader stack, then you can do a lot more with it. Run it through email, run it through your site, run it through all these different kind of channels that you may have in your environment.
Yeah. So let's talk through. You selected the CDP and it started through implementation. You guys have gone through implementation, and you're still kind of fresh, right? There, as much as we say, CDP implementation is smooth, it's never smooth. We're talking about different departments, different data sources, a very new platform to everyone. Walk us through, like, what were some of the things that you went through and you learned, that if you were to implement this or thinking about a CDP, what could be some of the things you would think through? Because like we have some of the audiences here, folks who are either in early stage or they're considering a CDP. And when I talk to some of them, there's a gap in reality of how much work it is to implement the CDP. And you and I were in the middle of it. So you were very involved. You were not just on the sidelines, you were there. What can you share with us here?
It's definitely, there's a lot to it. I think one of the things we learned that's probably the biggest thing is the amount of engineering effort that's involved, right? There's quite a bit of engineering, particularly around the CDP, because we talked about in the earlier parts, like, what are we looking for, right? We were looking for something that's a modern platform, something that has APIs that you can interact with. So if you don't have that kind of engineering discipline to be able to know how to interact with various different APIs and be able to use that like the back of your hand, it's a little bit of a challenge there. And we were able to get through. We have a great team. We have very smart people in the company. So we're able to kind of get where we need to go. But some of that engineering effort, I don't think I even had an idea of how much was going to be there. That's one thing. I think that another thing is thinking about the depth and width of the data. So like, we wanted to, initially it was all, we'll just bring everything, right? Bring everything into the CDP. Yeah. We're not sure if we're going to use it, but we'll just
let's have it there. Like, why not? All right. Yeah.
That's not a good way to approach the problem, right? You really should probably take some time, think about depth and the shape of the data that you want. Think about like how much, what kind of use cases you really need, what kind of segmentation you're really going to do. It's tempting to just bring everything in and take that approach, but we ended up having to carve out a lot of that because it was just too much information, and maybe we needed to take a step back there. I think another thing is for us, like we tried online and offline all at the same time, right? All in the same program, all together. And it's super powerful now that we have it, but I think it probably would have phased it. Maybe done a little bit more on the offline side first, understand what we have there, and then onboard some of the more online data sources. So maybe separate those two a little bit more. Training is always that thing, just timing the training things, both from a technical and end user perspective. Just, we try to start training too early, then you're not close enough to the tools. You don't know what you're doing yet. If you start too late, people don't know how to use the tools.
Yeah.
So that's always a little bit of a challenge. But I think we got it somewhat right. I think we would probably pushed it out a little bit more so that people would have some of the real data and tools to start working with as they did the training.
Yeah, I agree with you a lot on the idea of how much prep and even like design it takes, right? Because you're not going to bring data into the CDP. Yes, you need the use cases. Use cases need to be fleshed out so you know exactly what are the important data points. But then you also want to think about longer term, what are we going to be doing? Because the second you're designing the CDP based on what data is coming in, how it's coming in, how often it's being refreshed, that really dictates what you can do later on, right?
Yeah.
So I remember like in some cases where bringing data from the clubs in terms of like today, how transactions happen. There is a lot of information in these transactions. And you guys had to think through like, what do we bring today that helps us, but also how do we build this in a way where if we turn this to become real-time data collection for that, how would that happen, right? So there is a lot of design and solutioning that happens. It's not about requirements only. It's about like, how do we build a scalable and like a future-proof type of structure within the CDP, right? I remember we had a lot of these discussions.
It's a challenge for sure. And really, the CDP is only as good as the data, right? Because if you bring too little data, you have the same problem. If you bring too much data, then you have just a lot of stuff to deal with. So finding that balance of like where you want to be is really, really important. But I think the other thing is like we didn't try to solve everything. We have a lot of touch points that our members interact with us on that we haven't brought into the CDP yet, right? Because I think we started with the two big ones, right? Our online and offline sales-oriented things. But there's also customer service. We have a service desk at all our clubs. So you can really think about every single touch point that a member has with the VJ's brand. Eventually those things will all be in one place, and that's like our long term. I think that's why it's always kind of day one is figuring out like what's possible as you grow, right?
You have to step into it in a baby steps, right? Like it's the idea of having some of the key use cases that allows you to build the right infrastructure and pave the way, and then later start lighting up these other things. And you say, okay, for that we need to bring this data source, or we need to integrate with this destination, and then based on that you grow it. Right? This becomes like sub projects as you go. Let me ask you something, Vinoo. So one of the things that I've learned working with your team is how critical it is on the client side to have some key people involved. Because we have this situation where it's expected that the vendor, such as Adobe, a system integrator, whether it's Adobe Services or a partner, doing the implementation, is that it's like a white glove, right? They come in, they talk to our people, they figure out what needs to be done, they implement it, and we have a solution. We bring people, we train them, and we're good to go. We know that doesn't happen, right? Because you as a client, your business folks and technical folks already have so much happening, that this project is like an addition to an overloaded plate of tasks. What do you think was key for you? And I think you guys did that really well, to have certain people in there that were from beginning to end, such as you and a few others. Who do you think, what would you recommend for clients that are about to get into that journey?
Yeah.
What resources they should have on their side, plan for, whether to hire or make room for, to make sure this is successful?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, right? I agree with you. I mean, you kind of, I have that perception, right? That sometimes the vendors will just say, oh, you know, we'll take care of it, right? And then come back to us in a few months and we'll have everything in place. But, you know, you have to roll in this stuff, right? You have to really be in there. And I think that's something we did really well. We didn't have a huge team, you know, we did not have a lot of people, but you definitely need to have very solid data architecture, data engineering practices in your organization. That, you know, we have that, right? So we were able to capitalize on a lot of that good information. But yeah, I mean, I think we had a very kind of engaged business team that we would work with. We had a site operations and site engineering, and so we, you know, this became something that we just kind of morphed into as a project team. And you know, sometimes in the beginning of these things, you have these various different stakeholders across the organization that don't necessarily have to work together. But this I know you and I have talked about this a lot, right? Where this is the kind of project where you can't have people, you know, kind of going in their own swim lanes. It's just, it's impossible, right? Because everybody's now having to onboard their data in the same place, right? So, you know, having that, you know, we had a good governance team. We have a great set of people across digital marketing, UX and site experience, as well as our analytics folks that all are at the table. So we have that from a stakeholder management perspective, but the engineering side, you know, it's something that I take very seriously, is like, you know, I need to know how to do this stuff, right? That's just the way that we run things, is we're very hands-on in our approach. So, you know, I didn't let you do anything that I didn't know how to do myself, right? And that's how we try to operate in the organization. And I think having that mentality is really key, right? You need to be able to have people that are really willing to roll up their sleeves and kind of get into it, because it's not your typical, you know, SaaS-based, you know, external provider. I think I said in the beginning, one of our key tenets was we wanted to own this thing and we wanted to know how to drive it. So you kind of have to have that mentality from day one, and challenge whoever you're working with, whether it's a vendor, the systems integrator, whoever, to say, I need this information so that I can kind of run this, because when those folks are gone, it's our platform, right? So we had that mentality. That's kind of it's really key.
Yeah, I think what you guys have done that was really well was identifying from your side who were the key people that the vendor and system integrators knew how to run things by them, right? Like how, if I need, who is my technical lead, right? Who is my data person? Who is my business? And we don't only have one business lead, because like you said, a CDP, if the CDP is going to do its job properly, it needs to be breaking the silos. So if a team is running email, a team is running site, a team is running acquisition, all of those need to be considered to a certain extent as the business users of the CDP. So I think what you guys have done in identifying those folks, having the right process in including them for part of the discovery, but also part of the sign off on, does this really answer what you're trying to do? And in some cases, it wasn't, and we had to go back and revisit, like, okay, how can we do this better? Or identifying that, well, this is too much right now, and let's not do this part of implementation. We do it later on.
Yeah,
I feel this is so critical, and clients do not think through this enough. And that leads to problems in the implementation. This leads to, one, an implementation that the client is clueless about how to use the platform, has an expectation that this is going to do A, B, C, and D, and it's only able to do A because that's what happened, right? Folks from the data team could not get the data enough for them. The integrations were not up to par to what is expected. I think what you guys have done was able to plan ahead, and it didn't make it easy, right? It took a lot of work.
It did. And we spent a lot of time, I think, in the beginning, just getting people understanding, like, it's really key. Like, it's a little bit of solutions architecture, but it's also just getting everybody, whether it's, you know, somebody senior in the organization or the folks that are going to be running this thing, just getting everybody aligned in how the system was designed and how it works. Like, you really need to have that vision of what you're trying to build. Like, we drew lots of pictures, right? Lots of pictures in the beginning of where data was flowing, how data was going to flow, and what was the cadence of the data. You really have to have that in the beginning. Otherwise, people are just going to be, they're just not going to get it. And that was really key for us, is we wanted to make sure that everybody understood what we're trying to do, and bring everybody along for the ride, right? So there's a lot of different teams and stakeholders involved. So that's how we run a lot of our projects. This was really no different, but it was really key for this project for sure.
Yeah. I think even including program management from your side, so that you had an easy way for you to, not easy way, but a way for you to always keep a pulse on the project and have your senior leadership in the loop on how this is going. That was very impressive. So you would say that with the CDP, I've seen organizations bring a CDP into their stack, and it's supposed to bring people together from departments, but instead you end up having one team using it because no one else knows how to work with it, or they don't believe they were included part of the process. You guys obviously were able to work around that, and the CDP is built in a way where from beginning you got people involved, and I think it's going to benefit the entire organization. How did you, like, what would be your advice to accomplish that? Because that can be difficult, right? It can be, especially from a business side.
I think there's always that tendency, you bring on a whole bunch of new tech, and people still are kind of doing things in the way they have done it before, right? There's always that kind of, you kind of go, we have the project and you're running the project, and we're kind of heads down on everybody going in the same direction. But I've seen in other kinds of large projects like this, where everybody kind of goes back to the way we were working before, right? So one thing is, I think, the core tenet of a CDP is bringing together all the data silos in the organization. So you have that working toward your favor. But I think the other thing is, like, you need a role in the organization that's kind of like a multi-solutions kind of architecture person that understands the technology, but understands the business use cases that are trying to be enabled, and can connect the dots between those two, because that way, that person or that team, if it's a team, can help steer what's the right way to do things. Because now you have this kind of fancy car, right? You have this fancy car, it could do a lot of different things, but you need a team of people that are thinking about the solutioning for every single kind of use case. Some of these campaigns, you can do them all within one kind of application, but when you have an integrated solution with the data onboarding and the activation, you have to kind of think about a multi-solution kind of approach. So having roles or a role even that is focused around trying to help the business teams to sort out how to best design some of these as you go. That's, I think, very important. It's really key.
So one thing I see happening a lot is implementation wraps up, vendors, solution integrators leave, client goes through training, and then there's this like question of now what do we do now? How do we get more value out of it? It's almost like taking a team came in, did their thing, left, and now there's another team needs to be plugged in. It's never easy to do so. How are you guys thinking about continuing that momentum with the CDP and getting folks involved? Like there is situations where we've seen, well, let's start with now post the implementation, start with something little just to show some more wins, and then expand this to other departments. And now we'll get into the walking, we finish the crawling, let's get into walking, and eventually we'll get to run. But in reality, it's really tough to shift from implementation into go live and run and operate.
Yeah.
How are you guys dealing with that?
I think I mentioned like we have a governance team that has various different areas of the company all engaged. So digital marketing, our site experience folks, our analytics people, IT, and so that team, that's a cross-functional team. And so, that team is basically the ideation, right? So it's an ideation engine for the enterprise. And so we spend a lot of time just thinking about use cases, right? So the use cases drive the use of the tools, right? Because if you don't have use cases, then it's going to get stale, right? The use cases drive the innovation. So I think, we spend a lot of time, and we have a backlog now of use cases. A lot of these we don't know how to do yet, right? We don't know how to do them yet, but we are trying to think through, because we know it's possible. We just need to learn some of the components and how to integrate things. And so, I'd say that's probably key, is like keep your use cases fresh, keep them kind of a running list of what things you want to try and do, because that is what's going to fuel the use of the tools as you grow.
Excellent. Yeah, I think that's key to keep the momentum going. Okay.
Yeah.
Vinoo, anything you would do different through this process, or something you would have spent more time on or less time on, or if you would go back in time and in another multiverse, you will do exactly the same?
I think I mentioned some of the things around training, like probably defer the training a little bit. The more you can do the training as it's aligned to your own system, the more productive it's going to be, right?
Hands-on training based on your data and such.
Yeah. It's always a tricky thing, right? Because you want to get people exposed, but also if you get them exposed too early, it's not going to be as
it's going to go in and go out, because it's I have no idea what this is, we'll forget.
So
exactly.
The training things is something I'm very passionate about. I think it's so important, training, but it's always one of those it's a tricky thing, trying to figure out when's the right time to get people trained up. I feel like now is a great time, right? Because people are learning, but you still have to run the business, right? So you still have things you have to get done. I think the other part is phasing, trying to figure out like what are the key milestones that if you can break it up more. I felt like we ran for a very long time. There's quite a bit that we did all at once. And I think breaking it up a little bit, maybe having a win, putting something in in a production capacity, and then building up some momentum there, and then starting the next phase. We kind of evolved into doing everything in one big program. It worked out in the end. Like, I think we have a great team, as I mentioned, and that was kind of what made us successful. But it's a lot to do all at once.
Yep. No, this is good advice. I think the training is always tricky because you want to get people to understand what we're doing, so understand the tool and not be scared and discouraged by saying, like, I have no idea how this works, so I don't know what to do there. But also you want them to be trained on things that make sense to them, and things that they can relate to, and their data points and their use cases. So I think early exposure is good, but then training at the time when it's the data is in there is a good idea. Vinoo, this has been a pleasure. Thank you for sharing your experience. I think you guys are unique in the space where you've really thought this through well, planned for it properly, had the right folks on your side involved, and kept like close tabs on how things are going. And I think there's a lot of things we learned from that, and I think a lot of clients would definitely appreciated your input so that they can plan properly for their venture with a CDP or another marketing technology.
Yeah, definitely. I agree 100%. I feel like it's been a great experience. We've learned a ton, so much. And it's been great working with you as well and meeting you.
Absolutely. We'll do this again. I think I want in some time, once you guys wrap up some of the other things that you're doing, I think you guys are gonna light up some amazing experiences. So we'll definitely do this again, and we'll talk in more detail on some of the cool things that you're doing outside of AEP, right? You're integrating with some cool tools. You have some amazing use cases. Can't wait to share some of those with the world. But thank you, man. It was a pleasure. Thank you guys for joining us. This was recorded. It will be on our website in a week or so. We have 3 more webinars part of the series. We'll be sending out the dates for those. But thank you again, Vinoo, for our guests, and have a great one, man.
Yes, thanks everyone. Take care.
All right, see ya.